July 18, 1944, Saipan. The jungle stank of death and gunpowder. Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto led what remained of his squad through dense vegetation, moving toward an American position that had been abandoned hours earlier. His orders were simple: scavenge anything useful, ammunition, food, medical supplies, anything that might help his unit survive another day. Yamamoto was 23 years old. He had been fighting for 3 years. Manchuria, Philippines, now Saipan. He weighed 112 pounds, down from 145 when he enlisted. He had not eaten a full meal in 2 weeks. His unit's rations had been cut off when American naval forces encircled the island. They were starving. They were desperate. As his squad entered the abandoned American foxhole line, Yamamoto stopped and stared. The ground was littered with debris. Empty ammunition boxes, discarded helmets, torn uniforms. Cigarette butts. And bottles. Hundreds of glass bottles, dark green, curved, distinctive shape. Most were empty. Some were half full. A few were completely intact, still sealed. Yamamoto picked up one of the empty bottles. It was surprisingly heavy, made from thick glass with smooth, perfect curves. Embossed lettering ran along the side. Coca-Cola. He turned it upside down. A few drops of dark brown liquid dripped out. He caught them on his finger and touched them to his tongue. The taste hit him like an electric shock. Sweet. Intensely, impossibly sweet. Sweeter than anything he had tasted in over a year. He turned the bottle back upright, pressed the opening to his lips and tilted his head back. A few more drops fell onto his tongue. His entire body reacted to the sugar, neurons firing after months of deprivation. Around him, his squad members were having the same experience. Private Kenji Sato had found a bottle with about an inch of liquid remaining. He was drinking it in tiny sips, eyes closed, tears running down his face. Sergeant Hiroshi Nakamura held 3 bottles, shaking each one to collect the last drops. 2 younger soldiers were arguing over a half-full bottle they had found. Yamamoto watched this scene with growing horror. These were Imperial Japanese soldiers, descendants of samurai, warriors of the emperor, and they were licking empty bottles like starving dogs. But what truly terrified Yamamoto was not his squad's behavior. It was what these bottles represented. Americans drank this. Common soldiers, ordinary men. They drank sugar water as casually as Japanese soldiers drank tea. They consumed bottles of pure sweetness, then threw them away like garbage. And they had so many bottles that they could litter hundreds across a single position. Yamamoto sat down heavily on the ground, still holding the empty Coke bottle. He stared at it, turning it over in his hands, examining every detail. The glass was perfect. No bubbles, no imperfections, molded precisely with consistent thickness throughout. The embossed letters were clean and sharp. This was quality manufacturing, mass-produced, designed to be disposable. In Japan, a bottle of this quality would be reused indefinitely, cleaned, refilled, treasured. In America, they made billions of these and threw them away after a single use. That was the moment Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto realized Japan had already lost the war. He pulled out his diary, a small notebook he kept hidden in his uniform. His hands trembled as he wrote. They throw away bottles we would treasure. They drink sugar water while we drink mud. They produce these by the billions and discard them without thought. We are not fighting men. We are fighting a machine of infinite production. The war is already over. We just have not admitted it yet. This is the story of how empty Coca-Cola bottles broke the will of Japanese soldiers more effectively than any bomb. The story of how disposable abundance defeated desperate scarcity. The story of how America weaponized sugar. To understand what happened on Saipan in July 1944, you must first understand what Japanese soldiers had been eating for years. In 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the standard Imperial Japanese Army field ration consisted of rice, pickled vegetables, dried fish, and occasionally fresh vegetables or meat. It was not luxurious, but it was adequate. Soldiers received approximately 2,800 calories per day, enough to sustain combat operations. By 1942, as the war expanded across the Pacific and Southeast Asia, supply lines stretched dangerously thin. The quality of rations declined. Fresh food disappeared. Meat became rare. Vegetables were replaced with preserved items. But soldiers still received rice, the foundation of Japanese diet. Sugar was always scarce. Even in peacetime Japan, sugar was expensive, a luxury item. Most Japanese families used sugar sparingly, saving it for special occasions. Japanese soldiers received minimal sugar in their rations, perhaps a small amount in their tea or coffee substitute. It was never abundant. By 1943, as American submarines devastated Japanese merchant shipping, the situation became critical. Supply ships carrying food were sunk before reaching distant garrisons. Soldiers on Pacific Islands found themselves cut off, surviving on whatever they could scavenge. Rice rations were reduced, then reduced again, then replaced with whatever could be found locally. On Saipan, the Japanese garrison of 31,000 troops had been preparing for invasion since early 1944. They stockpiled rice, canned goods, and dried fish. But when the American assault began on June 15, 1944, the stockpiles proved inadequate. The battle lasted longer than expected. Supply depots were destroyed by naval bombardment. American forces cut off access to remaining supplies. By July, Japanese soldiers on Saipan were starving. The standard ration had been reduced to a handful of rice twice a day, sometimes mixed with weeds or tree bark to stretch supplies. Many soldiers received nothing at all. They foraged for roots, leaves, anything edible. Some units resorted to eating insects, snails, and if they were lucky, the occasional lizard or rat. Sugar had not been available for over a year. It was a memory, a luxury from peacetime that no longer existed. Most young soldiers conscripted during the war had never tasted refined sugar in their adult lives. Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto was one of these soldiers. Born in 1921 in a farming village outside Osaka, he came from a poor family. Sugar had been rare even in childhood, reserved for festivals and special occasions. When he was conscripted in 1941, military rations included small amounts of sugar in tea. But that ended in 1942. By 1944, sugar was something he remembered, but could not quite imagine tasting again. The Battle of Saipan was a nightmare. American forces landed with overwhelming firepower, naval guns that fired day and night, artillery that turned hillsides into craters, tanks that crushed defensive positions, aircraft that bombed relentlessly, and endless soldiers. For every American killed, 2 more appeared. For every Japanese soldier killed, there was no replacement. Yamamoto's unit started the battle with 48 men. By early July, 11 remained. They were surrounded, cut off from command, surviving in caves during the day and attempting desperate night attacks. They had no ammunition, no medical supplies, no food, just the will to fight and the knowledge that surrender meant dishonor. On July 18th, Yamamoto's sergeant ordered a reconnaissance of nearby American positions. Intelligence suggested the Americans had pulled back temporarily, regrouping for a final push. This was an opportunity to scavenge supplies, perhaps find weapons or food. Yamamoto led his squad through the jungle carefully, expecting ambushes, but they found nothing. The American position was genuinely abandoned. The soldiers had left in a hurry, leaving behind equipment, trash, and those bottles. The first thing Yamamoto noticed was the smell. Not death, not explosives, but something sweet. Faintly sweet, mixed with the jungle rot and sulfur from artillery. He followed the smell to a pile of bottles. He picked one up and examined it carefully. The bottle was about 6 inches tall, made from thick green glass. The shape was distinctive, curving inward at the middle, then flaring out again. The glass was smooth, perfectly molded, with no visible seams or imperfections. Embossed on one side were the words Coca-Cola in distinctive script. On the bottom, more text. Patent D105529. Bottle made by Root Glass Company. Yamamoto had seen bottles before. Glass containers were common in Japan. But Japanese bottles were simple, functional, often irregular. This American bottle was different. It was designed, artistic. The curves were intentional, not just functional, but aesthetic. And the manufacturing quality was extraordinary. Every bottle was identical. He looked around. Hundreds of these bottles littered the area. Hundreds, all identical, all made to the same exacting standard, all used once and discarded. The implications were staggering. To produce bottles of this quality in these quantities required industrial capacity beyond anything Japan possessed. Glass factories operating at massive scale. Quality control ensuring every bottle was perfect. Distribution networks delivering these to soldiers in the middle of the Pacific. And most incredibly, an economy so wealthy that these precision-manufactured bottles were considered disposable. Yamamoto turned the bottle upside down and a few drops fell out. He caught them on his finger and tasted them. The sweetness was overwhelming, intense, almost painful after so long without sugar. His body reacted immediately, craving more. He tipped the bottle to his mouth and captured the last few drops. The liquid was thick, syrupy, coating his tongue. The flavor was unlike anything he had experienced, not just sweet but complex, vanilla, citrus, spices, carbonation residue that tingled. It was magnificent. Around him, his squad was experiencing the same revelation. Private Kenji Sato had found a bottle with liquid still inside. He was drinking it slowly, reverently, like it was sake at a shrine. Sergeant Nakamura was collecting bottles, shaking each one to gather every drop. Two young privates, Akira Suzuki and Taro Kimura, were arguing over a half-full bottle. Suzuki had found it, but Kimura claimed he saw it first. The argument grew heated. These were soldiers who had fought side by side for months, now ready to fight each other over sugar water. Yamamoto stood up. "Enough," he ordered. "We share everything equally. Bring all the bottles with liquid. We will distribute it." The squad gathered their finds. In total, they had collected 7 bottles with measurable liquid remaining. The fullest bottle was about half full, roughly 3 ounces. The others contained between half an ounce and 2 ounces each. Total liquid recovered, approximately 12 ounces. Yamamoto divided the liquid as fairly as possible. Each man received about 1 ounce. They drank it slowly, making it last, savoring every drop. The effect on morale was immediate. The sugar hit their bloodstreams, providing energy they had not felt in weeks. Their spirits lifted, temporarily. Some men smiled for the first time in days, but Yamamoto felt only dread. He understood what this meant. These bottles represented American abundance. Americans drank sugar water casually, routinely, gave it to common soldiers, and produced it in quantities so vast that they could discard hundreds of bottles without concern. Japan could not compete with this. Japan could barely feed its soldiers rice. America was feeding its soldiers sugar water as a routine beverage. After distributing the Coke, Yamamoto ordered his squad to search the American position more thoroughly. They found other items that reinforced the same message: empty C-ration cans, dozens of them. Each can had contained a complete meal: meat, vegetables, crackers, candy, all preserved in metal cans that were more durable than anything Japanese soldiers carried. The cans were opened with built-in can openers, a simple mechanism that worked smoothly. Japanese soldiers opened their rations with bayonets, cigarette packs, American cigarettes, Camel and Lucky Strike brands, scattered everywhere. Japanese soldiers received minimal tobacco rations, often mixed with grass to stretch supplies. Americans apparently had so many cigarettes they could smoke constantly and discard half-smoked packs. Chewing gum wrappers, hundreds of them. Wrigley's spearmint. Japanese soldiers had never seen chewing gum. It was an incomprehensible product. You chewed it for flavor but did not swallow it? And Americans produced this in vast quantities for no practical purpose except pleasure? Chocolate bar wrappers, Hershey's, Mars. These were premium luxury items in any country. Americans gave them to common soldiers. But the Coke bottles were the most devastating, because they represented something worse than material advantage. They represented casual abundance. Americans did not just have more supplies. They had so much surplus that they could afford to give soldiers items that served no military purpose except to make life pleasant. Sergeant Nakamura picked up one of the Coke bottles and examined it closely. "Corporal," he said, "I need to show you something." Yamamoto walked over. Nakamura held the bottle up to the light. "Look at the glass," Nakamura said. "No bubbles, no imperfections, perfect clarity. This bottle is made better than our canteens." Yamamoto took the bottle and looked. Nakamura was right. Japanese military canteens were made from aluminum or steel, functional but rough. This glass bottle, designed to be thrown away, was manufactured to higher standards. Nakamura continued, "And look at the consistency. Every bottle is exactly the same. Same shape, same size, same weight. This is not craftsmanship. This is industrial production at a level we cannot match." "How many of these do you think they make?" Yamamoto asked. Nakamura thought for a moment. "Based on how many we found in this one position, how many American soldiers there are? Millions. Maybe billions." Yamamoto nodded slowly. "And they throw them all away." "Yes, they throw them all away." The two men stood in silence, holding empty Coke bottles, understanding, finally and completely, that Japan could not win this war. That evening, back in their cave hideout, Yamamoto pulled out his diary and began writing by the light of a small candle. His hand shook from exhaustion and malnutrition, but he needed to record what he had seen. July 18th, 1944. Today we scavenged an American position. We found hundreds of glass bottles containing a beverage called Coca-Cola. The bottles are made with extraordinary precision, better quality than our military equipment. Yet the Americans throw them away after single use. The liquid inside is pure sugar water, flavored and carbonated. It serves no military purpose. It is luxury, entertainment, pleasure. And they give it to common soldiers in unlimited quantities. I calculated the sugar content in one bottle. Approximately 35 grams of refined sugar. A Japanese private receives approximately 30 grams of sugar per month in his rations. One American bottle contains more sugar than we receive in 30 days. The Americans produce billions of these bottles. They give them to millions of soldiers. They consume incomprehensible quantities of sugar for no reason except taste. This is not a war between equal powers. This is a war between the 19th century and the 20th century, between scarcity and abundance, between a nation that treasures every grain of rice and a nation that throws away bottles we would consider precious artifacts. We cannot win. It is mathematically impossible. The Americans do not need to defeat us with weapons. They defeat us simply by existing at a scale we cannot comprehend. Yamamoto closed his diary and sat in the darkness. Around him, his squad members were sleeping, their stomachs temporarily satisfied by the ounce of Coke they had consumed. He knew the satisfaction was temporary. Tomorrow they would be hungry again. Tomorrow they would be weak again. Tomorrow they would face American soldiers who had eaten full meals and drunk sugar water. Private Kenji Sato was still awake, sitting near the cave entrance keeping watch. He held one of the empty Coke bottles, turning it over in his hands. "Corporal," Sato whispered, "can I ask you something?" Yamamoto nodded. "Do you think we can still win?" Yamamoto considered lying. Morale required optimism, but he was too tired for lies. "No," he said quietly. "We cannot win. We never could. Today proved it." Because of the bottles? Because of what the bottles represent. Sato, Japan is a poor nation pretending to be powerful. America is a rich nation that does not need to pretend. We are fighting with spirit and courage, but spirit cannot defeat industrial production. Courage cannot compete with unlimited resources. We are samurai fighting against a factory, and the factory will win. Sato was quiet for a long time. Then, what do? We fight because we are soldiers, because we swore oaths, because surrender is dishonor. But we fight, knowing the outcome is inevitable. Perhaps that is the only honor left to us. The next morning, July 19th, Yamamoto's squad attempted to return to their unit's main position. They moved carefully through the jungle, avoiding American patrols. As they traveled, they encountered other Japanese survivors, small groups, individuals, remnants of destroyed units. One group they encountered was led by Lieutenant Masao Tanaka, an intelligence officer. Tanaka's group had also been scavenging American positions and had made similar discoveries. "Corporal Yamamoto," Tanaka said, "I need to see your notes about what you found." Yamamoto was surprised. "My notes, sir? I know you keep a diary. I need to see what you wrote about the American supplies. This is official business." Yamamoto reluctantly handed over his diary. Tanaka read the entry about the Coke bottles carefully, his expression darkening. Then he handed the diary back. "Your calculations are correct," Tanaka said. "One bottle contains more sugar than a private receives in a month. But there is more you need to understand. According to intercepted American communications, Coca-Cola is producing 5 billion bottles per year for military consumption alone. 5 billion. That is separate from civilian production. The Americans are consuming sugar at a rate that exceeds Japan's entire annual sugar production, and they are doing it just for flavored beverages." Yamamoto tried to process this number. 5 billion bottles. It was incomprehensible. Tanaka continued, "I have been ordered to compile a report on American material superiority for headquarters, but I do not think I will be allowed to submit it. The truth is too demoralizing. If ordinary soldiers knew what the Americans have, many would refuse to fight. Some would commit suicide rather than face such hopelessness. So the command will suppress my report. They will continue telling soldiers that American supply lines are weak, that the Americans are soft, that we can still win. All lies. Why are you telling me this, sir? Because someone needs to know the truth. Because if Japan survives this war, we need people who understand why we lost. We did not lose because our soldiers lacked courage. We lost because we were poor, and they were rich. That is the only reason that matters. Tanaka saluted and moved on with his group. Yamamoto never saw him again. Years later, he learned that Lieutenant Tanaka had died in the final, suicidal banzai charge on July 7th, killed by American machine guns along with thousands of other Japanese soldiers. July 20th. Yamamoto's squad encountered an American patrol. The encounter was brief and one-sided. The Americans had automatic weapons, grenades, and radio support. Yamamoto's squad had 2 rifles with 5 bullets total, some homemade spears, and desperation. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. Private Suzuki was killed instantly. Private Kimura was wounded badly, shot through the stomach. Sergeant Nakamura was hit in the leg. The rest of the squad scattered into the jungle. Yamamoto helped Nakamura hide in a dense thicket. The wound was serious. The bullet had shattered bone. Nakamura was bleeding heavily. Without medical supplies, he would die within hours. "Leave me," Nakamura said.
"Save yourself."
Yamamoto shook his head. "I will not leave you. Then we will both die. You are being foolish." "Perhaps, but we are soldiers. We do not abandon our comrades." Nakamura managed a weak smile. "You are a good man, Yamamoto. When you survive this war, tell people the truth. Tell them we fought bravely, but were defeated by wealth. That is no shame." "I will tell them." Nakamura reached into his uniform and pulled out one of the empty Coke bottles he had collected. He had been carrying it, unable to throw it away. "Take this," he said. "Keep it as evidence. Show people what we faced." Yamamoto took the bottle. "I will keep it." "Good. Now go. I hear Americans coming. Go." Yamamoto hesitated. Then he heard voices speaking English. He squeezed Nakamura's hand once and disappeared into the jungle. He did not look back. He heard gunfire minutes later. Nakamura was dead. July 22nd. Yamamoto was alone. His entire squad was dead or scattered. He had not eaten in 3 days. He had one empty Coke bottle that he refused to discard, carrying it as a talisman or curse, he was not sure which. He was hiding in a small cave when he heard sounds outside, Japanese voices. He emerged carefully and found a group of civilians. Saipan had a large population of Japanese civilians, settlers who had moved to the island in the 1930s. Now they were trapped in a war zone. The group consisted of 12 people, mothers, children, elderly. They were terrified, starving, fleeing American forces. One of the women recognized Yamamoto's uniform. "Soldier," she said, "can you help us? Please, we have children. We need food. We need protection." Yamamoto looked at the group. He had no food, no weapons, no protection to offer. He was as helpless as they were. "I am sorry," he said. "I have nothing to give you." The woman started crying. "Please, my children have not eaten in 4 days. Do you have anything at all?" Yamamoto checked his pockets. He had nothing except the empty Coke bottle. He pulled it out and looked at it. Then he had an idea. "Follow me," he said. "I know where there might be food." He led the group back toward the American position where he had found the bottles. It was dangerous. The Americans might have returned. But it was the only place he knew where food might exist. They approached carefully. The position was still abandoned. Yamamoto led the civilians to the area where he had found the bottles. He began searching more carefully, digging through debris. He found several items the squad had missed during their initial search. Half a sea ration can with some food remaining. A chocolate bar, melted but edible. A few crackers in a sealed package. And another bottle of Coke, somehow intact, still sealed. He gave the food to the children first, They ate it desperately, crying with relief. He gave the Coke to a mother whose child was unconscious from dehydration. She opened the bottle and helped her child drink. The sugar and liquid revived the child within minutes. The mother looked at Yamamoto with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my son's life with this bottle." Yamamoto nodded. "That bottle represents America," he said. "They have so much that they can afford to save lives with their trash. Remember that. When this war is over, remember which nation valued life and which nation wasted it." July 25th. Japanese command ordered a final attack. All remaining troops were to assemble for a massive banzai charge against American lines. It was a suicide attack designed to inflict maximum casualties before inevitable defeat. Yamamoto received the order through a messenger. He was to report to the assembly point at midnight. He did not go. He was too weak, too tired, too aware that dying in a hopeless charge served no purpose except to satisfy some abstract concept of honor. He decided instead to surrender. It was disgraceful, it was shameful, but it was honest. On July 26th, Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto walked out of the jungle with his hands raised. He carried only his diary and one empty Coca-Cola bottle. American Marines approached cautiously, weapons ready. They searched him, found no weapons, and took him prisoner. The Marines were curious about the bottle. Why was he carrying it? One Marine picked it up and examined it. "Hey, this guy's carrying a Coke bottle. Think he wants a drink?" The Marines laughed. One of them pulled out a full bottle of Coke from his pack and handed it to Yamamoto. "Here you go, buddy. Have one on us." Yamamoto took the bottle with shaking hands. It was cold, ice cold. The Americans had ice. In the middle of a jungle battlefield, they had refrigeration for their beverages. He opened the bottle and drank. The sweetness was overwhelming. The carbonation hurt his throat. The cold liquid shocked his system. He drank half the bottle in one long gulp, then stopped, afraid he would vomit. The Marine who gave him the Coke smiled. "Take it easy, buddy. You ain't had sugar in a while, huh?" Yamamoto shook his head. "No sugar. Long time no sugar." "Well, we got plenty. Drink up." Yamamoto finished the bottle slowly. As he drank, he watched the American Marines. They were eating lunch, opening cans of food, drinking Cokes, smoking cigarettes, talking casually as if they were not in the middle of a war zone. They had so much that war seemed like an inconvenience rather than a desperate struggle. One Marine noticed Yamamoto watching them. He walked over and offered Yamamoto a cigarette. "Smoke." Yamamoto took it. The Marine lit it for him. Yamamoto inhaled and coughed. American tobacco was stronger than Japanese. But it was real tobacco, not the grass-mixed substitutes he had been smoking. "You boys had it rough," the Marine said. "We found some of your positions. Ain't no food, no supplies. How were you even fighting?" Yamamoto searched for English words. He had studied some English in school, but was not fluent. "We fight with spirit," he said slowly. "No food, no weapons, but we fight." The Marine nodded. "That's rough, buddy. Well, the fighting's over for you now. You'll be okay. We'll feed you, get you healthy. You're safe now." Yamamoto did not feel safe. He felt ashamed. He had survived. He had surrendered. He had violated everything he had been taught about honor and duty. But he was alive, and he was holding an empty Coke bottle that represented the truth nobody wanted to admit. Yamamoto was transported to a POW camp on Saipan, then later to a larger facility in Hawaii. During processing, American officers interviewed him about his unit, his experiences, and what he had seen. One intelligence officer, a Japanese-American lieutenant named Robert Nakayama, spoke fluent Japanese. Nakayama noticed the Coke bottle among Yamamoto's possessions. "Why do you keep this bottle?" he asked. Yamamoto explained. "This bottle represents why Japan lost the war. This bottle contains more sugar than a Japanese soldier receives in a month. Americans produce billions of these and throw them away. When I saw these bottles on Saipan, I knew we could not win. I keep it as evidence, as a reminder." Nakayama listened carefully. Then he wrote a detailed note in Yamamoto's file. "This prisoner has valuable insights into Japanese morale collapse. Recommend further interviews." Over the following weeks, Yamamoto was interviewed multiple times by American intelligence officers. They wanted to understand how Japanese soldiers perceived American material superiority. Yamamoto told them about the Coke bottles, the cigarettes, the chocolate, the sea rations, the casual abundance that destroyed Japanese morale more effectively than any weapon. One officer asked, "If you knew you could not win, why did you keep fighting?" Yamamoto thought carefully before answering. "Because we are soldiers, because we swore oaths, because surrender means dishonor, but mostly because we did not have a choice." Officers told us that surrender meant torture and death. We believed them, so we fought even though we knew it was hopeless. Many men chose suicide rather than surrender. They died believing they served their emperor with honor. But I think they mostly died because they were lied to. The officer wrote this down. Then he asked, "What do you think will happen to Japan after the war?" Yamamoto considered this question for a long time. "Japan will be destroyed," he said finally. "Our cities will be burned. Our people will starve. We will lose everything. But perhaps that is necessary. Perhaps we need to lose everything before we can learn the truth. The truth that wealth comes from production, not conquest. That abundance comes from industry, not ideology. That you cannot win wars with spirit alone. America understands these truths. Japan must learn them." The officer nodded. "You are a thoughtful man, Corporal Yamamoto. I think you will do well in the new Japan that comes after this war." August 15th, 1945. The war ended. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast. In the POW camp, Japanese prisoners listened in stunned silence. Some cried, some raged, some simply sat numbly, unable to process that the impossible had happened. Yamamoto felt relief. The war was over. The dying would stop. Japan had lost, but Japan would survive, and maybe, finally, people would be willing to hear the truth. In the years after the war, Takeshi Yamamoto returned to Japan. His village had been destroyed by American bombing. His parents were dead. His younger brother had died fighting in the Philippines. But Yamamoto survived, and he carried with him the empty Coke bottle that had changed his understanding of the war. He settled in Osaka and found work as a translator for American occupation forces. His English improved rapidly. He worked in logistics, helping coordinate food distribution and reconstruction efforts. He watched as American ships unloaded supplies in quantities that still seemed incomprehensible. Food, medicine, building materials, and yes, Coca-Cola. In 1946, General Douglas MacArthur ordered the establishment of Coca-Cola bottling plants in Japan. The first plant opened in Tokyo within months of surrender. The symbolism was deliberate. Coca-Cola represented American victory, American abundance, American power. Making it available to Japanese civilians was a demonstration of what Japan could become if it embraced American economic models. Yamamoto watched this development with mixed emotions. The drink that had broken his spirit on Saipan was now being produced in his own country. Japanese workers were learning to operate American bottling equipment. Japanese civilians were buying Coke and drinking it casually like Americans did. One day in 1947, Yamamoto saw a Japanese child drinking a Coke outside a Tokyo train station. The child drank it quickly, then threw the empty bottle in a trash bin without a second thought. Discarded. Disposable. Worthless. Yamamoto walked over and retrieved the bottle from the trash. The child looked at him strangely. Why would an adult dig through trash for an empty bottle? Yamamoto held the bottle up to the light. Because 3 years ago men died fighting over these bottles, he said quietly. Because this bottle represents the difference between poverty and wealth, between scarcity and abundance. Because we need to remember what these bottles taught us. The child did not understand. He walked away thinking the man was crazy. But Yamamoto kept the bottle. He added it to his collection, placing it next to the original bottle from Saipan that he had carried through the war. In 1950, Yamamoto opened a small business importing American goods. Within 5 years, he was one of the largest distributors of Coca-Cola in the Kansai region. By 1960, he was wealthy, successful, respected. The drink that had symbolized defeat now symbolized prosperity. He never forgot the lesson. Abundance wins. Production wins. Wealth wins. Japan had learned this lesson through devastating defeat, but having learned it, Japan applied it with extraordinary effectiveness. The post-war economic miracle that transformed Japan from ruins to industrial powerhouse was built on understanding what the Coke bottles had revealed. Efficient production, quality control, mass manufacturing, industrial abundance. Yamamoto kept his 2 Coke bottles in a glass case in his office. One from Saipan, empty and worn. One from Tokyo, discarded by a child who did not understand its significance. When business partners asked about them, he told them the story. These bottles ended the war, he would say. Not the atomic bombs, not the Soviet invasion. These bottles. Because they revealed a truth that could not be denied. America was so wealthy they could afford to give soldiers luxury drinks and throw away the bottles. Japan was so poor we could not feed our soldiers rice. Once you understand that gap, you understand why the war ended as it did. Some people thought he was being dramatic, but others, especially those who had fought in the war, understood. They had seen the same abundance, the same casual waste, the same overwhelming evidence of American material superiority. Takeshi Yamamoto died in 1988 at the age of 67. His daughter inherited his business. She also inherited the 2 Coke bottles, which she kept in her own office. The bottles became family heirlooms, passed down through generations. Each generation learning the story of how their grandfather realized Japan had lost the war because Americans drank sugar water. Today, Japan is one of the largest consumers of Coca-Cola outside the United States. Japanese vending machines sell Coke on nearly every street corner. Japanese children drink it without thinking about its history or significance. The drink that once represented unattainable American wealth is now just another beverage in a wealthy Japanese society. But the lesson remains. The Coke bottles on Saipan revealed a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Wars are not won by courage or honor or fighting spirit. Wars are won by industrial production, resource abundance, and economic strength. The nation that can produce billions of disposable luxuries will defeat the nation that struggles to feed its soldiers. Japan learned this lesson through humiliating defeat. But having learned it, Japan became one of the wealthiest nations on earth. The student learned from the teacher. The defeated learned from the victor. and the Coke bottles that once symbolized Japan's weakness became symbols of Japan's transformation.
In a museum in Osaka, there is a small exhibit about the Pacific War. Among the artifacts is an empty Coca-Cola bottle, recovered from Saipan in 1944, donated by the Yamamoto family. Next to it is a card with a quote from Takeshi Yamamoto's diary. "They throw away bottles we would treasure. They drink sugar water while we drink mud. The war is already over, we just have not admitted it yet." That was the moment Japan lost. Not in any specific battle, not when cities were bombed or when the emperor surrendered. Japan lost when its soldiers licked empty Coke bottles and realized they were fighting an enemy with resources beyond comprehension. The bottles were not weapons, but they defeated Japan more completely than any bomb could have, because they revealed the truth, and once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Corporal Takeshi Yamamoto saw the truth in July 1944 on Saipan. Japan saw the truth in August 1945 when it surrendered. And the world learned the truth in the years after as American abundance reshaped the global economy. The Coke bottle was never just a bottle. It was evidence. It was testimony. It was the war in miniature, captured in glass and syrup. And it tasted like defeat. If you found this story fascinating, there are hundreds more untold stories from World War II waiting to be discovered. Subscribe to ensure you never miss these remarkable accounts of courage, sacrifice, and transformation.